Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about carabiners, often referred to as beaners for short. There are a lot of uses for carabiners. You've probably seen them used in climbing, but there are just a ton of other utility uses around the house, in the shop, in the garage, in the car. You could take something like this, for example, and just clip your car keys to it. Clip the other end and then clip it to your belt, and now you've got a great holder for your car keys. Very inexpensive. Something like this probably costs you 50 cents to $1 just about anywhere. And then you've got more high-end uses like climbing or rescue situations, or just industrial use. So really your imagination is probably the limit. We're talking about the carabiners a little bit today, about the what to look for, how they're made, the different parts, because when we look at the section on webbing, we're going to be using carabiners there. And I've mentioned carabiners throughout different knots in the course. So I wanted you to at least have an understanding of the different types, because there are a lot of different types, just like there's a lot of different types of rope, because it really depends on the use. So I've already talked about this one here, and then these three are higher end that could be used, let's say, for climbing. Now, you have two primary materials that you're going to see carabiners are made of. First will be aluminum, which is a great choice because aluminum is very strong and it's very light. So it's a great choice for someone like a rock climber. Towards the other end, we've got steel, and steel is very strong. They're going to be a lot stronger than the aluminum carabiners, but the trade-off is they're a lot heavier. So you can see why the climbers would prefer aluminum, because they're going to be lifting this thing up and down a mountainside, and they want to keep the weight as limited as possible. Whereas in an industrial type setting, or even in a rescue type setting, you really may want as strong as you can get. But these guys are pretty strong too, and you do have a lot of choices here. But let's talk about the details. A little bit about the anatomy of a carabiner. This end here, which is opposite this end, and this end is called the gate. It's the part of the carabiner that springs open, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the part of the carabiner that's opposite the gate is called the spine. The spine of the carabiner is the strongest part and is designed to bear most of the weight. And we'll talk about the strength rating in a minute as well. So you can see here we have a couple of different shapes. These are both very similar. They're just kind of variations on a D shape, whereas here we have just a regular oval shaped carabiner. Now, the oval shapes are actually a really great choice if you're just getting started and you're wondering, or you're just overwhelmed by all the choices for carabiners. For basic utility use, the oval shaped carabiner is a great choice because it is so symmetrical, so you're not as much worried about well, gee, which end should I use, which end should I put for here on this side, because both ends are really the same. And compared to the more D-shaped, you'll notice that the amount of real estate on the inside of one end, the larger end of the frame, sometimes called the basket, is more than this side. So this is where the carabiners get a little more specialized depending what you're doing. So when we talked about webbing, and we had 1-inch webbing, you can see that 1-inch webbing would fit in here pretty well, but on this side it would probably be a little bunched up. It doesn't mean I wouldn't use it with 1-inch webbing, but something like this would offer a more symmetrical approach, and the webbing would weigh a little flatter on both sides because this opening is bigger than this opening right here. And of course, if I had a steel carabiner, it probably would even be larger. And what that means is I could put multiple ropes in here, because there are circumstances where you might want to have multiple ropes inside the carabiner, in particular if you're using the carabiner as a pulley. We're not going to look at that in this particular course, but if you think back to your high school science days, you know that a pulley is one of the different types of simple machines, just like a lever. and it will increase, almost stated very simply, make you stronger than you really are. So if you need to lift 100 pounds and you just can't possibly lift it, you could set up a pulley system that could let you lift that very easily, depending on how many pulleys you use and so forth. But carabiners are great for that because they can act as a pulley. So you might have multiple ropes in here if you're doing something like that, so having more space is good. Again, aluminum is a great choice just because it is so light. I tend to only carry aluminum carabiners in my emergency bag and in my rope bag, just because of the strength rating is pretty much what I need, and there are different shape options out there. So let's talk about strength rating. As I mentioned, with this little guy here, strength is really just not an issue. You would never even make a choice like this for something that is so inexpensive if you had to do anything serious with it. Anything over 40 or 50 pounds with this, I'd be getting a little nervous, depending what that weight was, and if potentially if it broke, who would be injured. So any decent carabiner that you buy will have its strength rating stamped on it. And let's take a look at that now. So what you notice is that there's some markings and some writing down here along the spine of the carabiner. And the first thing that you see, at least with this manufacturer, is they put a double arrow going this direction. So, and then next to it is the number 24. So what they're telling you is that along the spine of the carabiner in the direction of the arrows, that this carabiner is rated for 24 kilonewtons. And that's something you're also going to find when you look at strength ratings for both rope and carabiners. And if you watch the video on rope, you know that 1 kilonewton is equal to about 225 pounds. So at 24 kilonewtons, we're at 5,400 pounds along the axis of the carabiner. Now that's also assuming the gate is closed. And we're going to talk about the different gate types, but it's important that the gate is closed when you look at that highest rating on the carabiner. Next to it, there's an arrow pointing up and down in this direction. So you might be wondering, well, why is that the case? Because I thought I would just be pulling this way along the spine. And typically that's what you should be doing or will be doing most of the time, but not necessarily. There are times, especially with an oval-shaped carabiner, where that is how the direction of pull might actually be occurring. Maybe you've got a rope here, webbing here, webbing here. It's hard to say for sure. So the carabiner is rated in the direction of, if you're pulling the gate that direction, the spine this way. And as you can see here, we have a rating of 7 kilonewtons, which is 1,575 pounds. So it just shows you that the strength rating of this carabiner along this axis is only 1/3 of the strength along the spine. So that's a really big deal. That's why we try to get the rope as close to the spine as possible. We'll make it as strong. And that's one of the nice things about actually this design. You'll see that as the rope comes in here and it hits this part of the carabiner near the gate, it will automatically want to end up over here near the spine because of the slope of the frame. Then finally, after that 7, we see this odd looking picture which almost kind of looks like a number 9 on its side, but what it's supposed to show you is that in the carabiner's open position, this little bit of the gate here being open, and next to it we see it says 7 kilonewtons. So what that tells us is that in this position, with the weight along the spine, with the gate open, that the carabiner will only support 7 kilonewtons or 1,575 pounds. So there again, it's really amazing to see that this carabiner that normally will hold over 5,000 pounds suddenly will only hold 1,500 if the gate is open. Which brings me to the next discussion about the gate itself. Now, pretty much all gates that you will see on all carabiners are going to be spring-loaded, meaning if I open it and I release it, it's going to spring back, and that's the good news. But in this particular one, the bad news is, what is to stop this gate from opening now that it's already closed? In other words, something could hit it. It could be, who knows, it could be a rock if you're climbing, could hit it and open it. And we know that as soon as that happens, we've lost a tremendous amount of strength. So that's something we really don't want to have happen. So ideally, what we'd like to have in a situation where we have concerns about safety, or there's a lot of movement of the rope in the carabiner, is to make sure that this gate stays closed. So what we have with these carabiners are what are called locking gates. And there's different types of locking gates. So the first one that we'll look at is just what is called a screw gate. And these are kind of the workhorse of the carabiner. They've been around for a long time, very traditional. You just turn it to lock it, and now I can't open it, and you have to spin it, and these do spin really easily if they're a good quality, and now it can open. So I open it, and let's say I have a rope here, a loop. I put it through, I release it, I can give it a spin with my thumb, and now it's locked, and it's secure, and now it's not going to come open. The upside of these is that that gate will stay closed. And another upside to this type of construction is that it tends to perform better than the other type we're going to look at here in a minute, called the twist lock, because there just aren't as many moving parts. You're really just screwing the carabiner closed and it will stay closed. And so in really cold conditions or icy conditions, it tends to perform pretty well, so it's reliable. The downside is you have to remember to screw it closed. And that may sound like an odd thing to say, like saying, well, gee, it means I have to remember to tie my shoes. But remember, when you put your rope in and you release it, it's very hard to tell whether it's locked or not. So under any kind of stressful situation, or if you just are a little forgetful, it's very easy not to lock this. So you really want to get in the habit of putting your rope in and locking it, and it's just an integral part of the muscle memory you want to get into whenever you're using a carabiner. However, for those folks that have a tendency to forget things, these are both made by the same company. These are both Black Diamond, but they're not the only company that makes this style. They've come up with what is called the twist lock. So with a twist lock, I have to turn it a quarter turn, then I can open it. But watch what happens when I let it go. Now it seems like it just snapped back into place and I have to tighten it, but you notice I don't have to tighten it. Really, what I have to do is to release it by twisting it, but the minute it goes back into place, it is self-locking. And the downside of this is that because there's more moving parts, it's not only a spring-loaded gate to open and close it, there's a spring-loaded part to lock it. And in very icy conditions or just very, very cold weather, this may not perform as well. Now, if you're not in those types of situations, probably again where you're either doing some work with these in a very cold climate like Alaska, or you're doing some hiking in up some very cold or icy mountains, that probably is not going to matter. In which case, it comes down to personal preference. Do you like having this style, a little more traditional, and you'll remember to lock it, or do you like this? I actually kind of thought this was a cool idea when I got it, but I'm not sure I'm 100% sold on it. I really is a personal preference. I find sometimes that I let it slip, or I don't twist it enough to open it, and I'm kind of struggling a little bit with it. Because sometimes you're having to do some of these things one-handed, and it's just easier for me to flip that with my thumb, and now it's open. You can't really do that with this. You have to hold it open in order to completely open the gate. Again, these are real subtle differences, but I recommend you try them both and see which one is just more comfortable for you. These are both rated identically, by the way. 7 or 24 kilonewtons, 7 along this axis, and 7 along this axis with the gate open. Now the oval one is a little bit different. It has the same 24 kilonewton rating this direction, but it's got a 10 kilonewton rating this direction. If the weight is pulling the spine this way and pulling on the gate that direction. And the reason that is because this is symmetrical, and you can see that the D shape, you aren't really ever going to have a force pulling, because if you have some webbing in here, you're going to have this going off at an angle this way and the tension going this way. That puts a real uneven stress on the frame, and therefore you're giving up a couple of kilonewtons, unlike the oval shape, which is very symmetrical, so you're getting a couple more kilonewtons out of it. Specifically, it's again rated for 10, which is 20 or 2,250 pounds. But the other rating with the gate open is also 7 kilonewtons. So that gives you something to think about when you're shopping. Now, to give you some idea on price, if you're looking at carabiners like this, which are in this weight class, probably again around the 5,000 pound rating, these were, the oval was I think $15, and I paid about $18 for these. Again, all three are aluminum. You can certainly go cheaper and you'll just get a lower weight rating. You'll get different types of locking mechanisms. Again, if you're just using this for utility around the house, this type of non-locking gate may really be fine for what you're doing. Just understand the risks of doing that. Certainly wouldn't use it for any type of situation where there might be life or property. I would want to go with something locking. If you want to look at the steel carabiners, which are again going to be a lot heavier but a lot stronger, great choice, you're probably talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 or more, so potentially almost double. But rather than a 24 kilonewton rating on these, you could be in the 40-50 kilonewton rating, which again is 10,000 pounds or so. So if you think you might be lifting something that heavy, absolutely, that's a great choice. So it gives you a lot to think about. When you go and look at these in the store or online, you're going to be overwhelmed, but hopefully now you have a little bit of a better idea of what to look for if you want to add one of these to your rope bag.